morning and welcome to the modern approach to device management. Bryton Wishart here, going to be taking you through this session. Solution architect at NTAG, and I guess I really focus on managing devices coming from all the telco side and the ICT side. So I deal with mobility all the way through to end compute. For any questions of this session, please just throw them in the Q&A and I will get to them at the end. So I'll get through the content first, so then we have some time to look at any questions or discussions. Let's move on. So first of all, I just want to take note of our traditional owners of the land, as well as our friends over in New Zealand. Code of conduct for May 365. Please have a quick read of this. If not, there's a less quick version on the website. Today the mission, I guess, of this slide deck and this session is to really understand what is the benefits of using the modern approach to managing devices. Why creating a positive end user experience actually matters, and how do we achieve the secure by design? You know, if we look at COVID and the way it has changed our lives, work from home is the new norm. You know, Microsoft has said it's seen 2 years of digital transformation, achieved in a couple of months. And Australia businesses has had to become really, really flexible. The businesses that have had the correct tools, processes and policies in place has just been able to continue like normal. They've just been able to pick up their devices and go home. Other businesses have just had to spend so much time and effort to get flexible. I guess the thing is, what is the cost of that to those businesses? How many of you spent your first month of COVID just helping businesses get remote? I know a lot of my friends who work in IT spent weeks just setting up VPNs, remote desktop farms, anything they could do to help customers get set up and work remote. But why? Why does all that matter, and why do we care? You know, why? It really comes down to that we are in ICT and we are a service-based industry now. Realistically, we have to actually care about what service we provide our customers and what service when I say customers, that can be internal or external customers. You know, if you're internal ICT, all those people that you support, they're your customers. You really want them to want to work with you. And we have to enable them. Have a think about the last time you went to a place and received bad service. You know, it might be a while now because of COVID, but an example is if you go to a coffee shop and you get burnt coffee, you're probably not going to go back there. One, you probably had a horrible product and the service just hasn't cared about the coffee to make it correctly. So for me, it's always been about making a great service experience for people. You know, really focusing on the simple and flexible approach, while at the same time still providing the security that we need from our ICT to make sure people aren't doing the wrong thing. You know, just remember, the same frustrations that affect them affect us. I guess then, what is the modern desktop, or what is the modern device approach? It's a series of concepts and ideas and ways that Microsoft has put together to use technology. Now, in a typical Microsoft fashion, the Microsoft Cloud is the core. You know, so that's your Microsoft 365. It's then really about using the tools from an IT point of view to manage all those devices. And then the other thing is actually having a device that fits, which is modern. So a fine example of that is a Surface Pro. They are a modern device. The latest MacBooks, devices that have cameras, microphones. It's all about getting the correct gear to the correct people and having the correct tools and systems in place to support it. The great thing about this is if you get it right, it's scalable. And it's scalable to large enterprises. I guess, how do we get started? how do we go down the road of the modern device approach? Well, there's probably a few areas that we have to look at first, and they comprise of things like the device, what systems and processes are in place, as well as how do you actually make employees or customers self-serve. So with modern devices, it's really about getting a device that your users love. They've got to be a device that people actually care and want. If you've ever given somebody who is a Ford lover a Holden, the car will be treated like trash. It will break down all the time. You'll hear them complain constantly. You give somebody who's a Ford person a Ford, that thing could be running on fumes with tires and everything falling off. That person's going to say that's still the best car in the world, right? So, opinions and personal aspects do matter to this. The other thing is make sure the device has the webcam, microphone. They should be all standard. Ideally, you want people to be able to pick this up and go places. In the world of COVID, it's all about mobility. We want to be able to pick a device up, go somewhere else. Even when the world starts to return to normality, which it is slowly, people are still going to want to be able to pick up their devices and go to meetings. So you want it to be a light and easy to carry, which normally means you're talking a fairly good Ultrabook or something along those lines. And style does matter. I can think of a couple of users I know who brought a Surface laptop because it was red. The style was the important thing. That red was just, for her, was it. That was the thing she loved. It wasn't until she started using the device that the other aspects going, oh, this is actually really light. I like this. But it was the red that caught her eye. So, we can't throw that away. It does matter to people. And after all, think about your own habits and what you look at. Chances are you go and look at something that is fairly nice. And you go, yep, I want that. I like that nice aluminium case. I want that. So make sure you get devices that users are going to love and use. Make sure they can do video conference. Make sure they have cameras, microphone. Get it all. You want that. You want them to use the tools you're providing them, and you want the experience for them to actually like the device. One of the next areas is the deployment programs or the vendor programs. And these are important because when you're talking modern desktop, we want these devices to just automatically roll in the tools. We don't want to go and fight between all these different tools. We don't want to have to go manually touch every single device. One, it's a tedious task. If you've ever had to manually image hundreds of devices, it can take a couple of days, and by the end of it, you never want to see that device again. So depending on the type of device you use, if it's a series of iPads, get them enrolled into Apple Business Manager. You need to work with your vendors and your disties there. You can manually load them in using tools like Apple Configurator, but it's a bit of a 2 or 3 step process that will require you to physically touch every device. So when you're going down this road of, planning a modern device strategy, have a think about what devices can you get into these vendor programs by the distie, so you don't have to do it. If you're deploying a fleet of Samsung Android phones, get them into Samsung Knox. These programs are all free. They don't cost money, but you do need to work with vendors and disties who can enroll them for you into that background. For Windows devices, Windows AutoPilot, again, if you're getting Surfaces, disties can put those straight into your AutoPilot tenancy. And then you have things like Android Enterprise, and Android's a bit fractured in this deployment world, depending if it's Samsung or Google. But there are vendor programs for each one. Once you have your devices in the program, you need to go in and assign them to your different MDMs. And that means you actually have to have an MDM. The great thing about this is when the devices hit those programs, they'll get pushed to that MDM automatically. That means you're not missing a device by accident. How many, has anyone here ever had a pile of laptops they're imaging, gone through, and then go to the end gone, I don't know if that one or that one's finished yet. I know I was touching one of them, and then you have to sit there and look through both. Or you get to the end and some user gets the device going, this is not set up properly. Something's missing. So really get these stuff in and automate it and make your life easier. So look at setting these programs up. Things like Apple Business Manager, you just need to get the customer's DUNS number. There's a great website, and I can find that link and post it in the Q&A, which you can use to look up a number, get the DUNS number, and you register that with Apple. For Windows Autopilot, I'd recommend you go look at Mark O'Shea's session on Autopilot. He breaks that down wonderfully. And for Samsung, you just contact Samsung, and Android Enterprise, you contact Google. These programs, they take 2 or 3 days on the back end to get approved and set up by the vendors. But once they're there, they really are your best friend. So the next thing is really having your MDM. So whether this is AirWatch, Intune, my recommendations is Intune. I love that MDM from a device point of view. And I find it does a lot more than a lot of the other MDMs, especially when we're talking Windows devices. But I work with customers who have AirWatch. But once you have your MDM, you need to build out all your policies. And these things are, these are the things that do the heavy lifting for you. So, there's kind of three core things you look at. One is configuration policies. That is setting the device up how you want it, setting all the settings. If you pretty much look at things like your group policy objects and go, okay, what policies do I actually need here? So this becomes a time to clean up group policy. Look at all the policies, look at the ones that you need. They're the ones you build into configuration policies. So it could be that you want lock screens. It could be that you want password enforcements. You might want to enforce things like BitLock encryption. It's all these different policies you go through and build out into this MDM, and then you assign them to your user groups. The next step is your compliance policies. And for me, compliance policies are really about enforcing the configuration, making sure the devices stay in a set configuration that you have deemed responsible or compliant for the business. So once you go through and build all these configuration, build a compliance policy that goes, hey, this device must have this, this, and this. If these things don't exist on this device, we're going to mark it as non-compliant. And what we do with non-compliance is up to us. It could be we provide a grace period saying, okay, cool, the device is non-compliant, but it's in grace period for 15 days, which allows us to fix it without impacting the end user. Now, some businesses may not like that. They may say, if the device is not compliant, we just want it to be blocked from accessing work resources. And you can set those policies. So you need to go through, set those policies. The last one is kind of manage your updates. So set update policies and enforce when and how this happens. And that's really around for, iOS devices, for an example. Who here has gone through, had their network taken down because iOS updates? You've got 30, 40 people sitting in an office, offer, maybe a fiber connection of 50, 50, 100, 100, 200, 200. Next minute, Apple pushes out, a new update of 13. It's a 2 gig update. Every single iPhone decides they want to download it and smash it right now. Next minute, your bandwidth grinds to a halt. With Intune, you can set when iOS devices update, whether it's during business hours or outside of business hours. The fact is you can set those times and control when you're going to see those update storms happen. And that is important because, again, we don't want to grind the network to a halt and create a negative experience for our end users. When it comes to Windows, same thing. Go through, set up your Windows update policies. That policy there is going to control when Windows gets feature packs, quality updates, how long you can enforce it, what happens. It's one of the best policies I've used for managing Windows updates. I hate WSOS with a passion. I just can't stand it. And a lot of the remote management tools I've used just don't do Windows updates as well as Microsoft does via Intune. So for me, it's Windows updates for a business driven by Intune to all my Windows devices is the way to go. And look, here's our competition week 3 QR code. So if you're registered with May 365, scan this code, add yourself into the competition. Any rules or prizes are down there at May 365, m365may.com/competition-rules. One of the next areas to look at is things like your user access. So you want to define how users actually access resources and access your resources from there. And that can be tied into things like, Windows Hello. So if you want to use a sign into that modern device, why are we going to get them to go and type in their username and password? There are more secure ways to set up user access to those devices. So going through and making sure Windows Hello is turned on, enabling the biometric logging tools is key here. People want to be able to get into the devices quickly and easily. This is why all the phones have face login. You look at a phone, it logs you in. That's people just expect that from devices these days, and it shouldn't be any different with their I guess desktop or laptop device. The next thing is set up your conditional access policies. So we've set up policies around how you access the device, but now we need policies set up how we actually access work resources. And to do that, you really have to look at the when, where, and what. So an example of that is if you're not on the network, you might want to trigger multi-factor authentication. When you might say, hey, outside, when these 2 or 3 different things, such as let's say it's a device that's not enrolled, or maybe it's a device that's non-compliant, you might want to then trigger multi-factor to just make sure that person is who they say they are. And then what really to come down to what applications you have. You might have an internal finance system, and you might go, do you know what? As a way to protect finance systems, we want to just make sure everybody, no matter what happens, must multi-factor to access that system. So it's about really setting out these different policies to help customers. One of the next areas is things like your security baselines. So this is where you would go through in things like Intune and build out what is the secure nature of your devices. So going through and setting up a baseline saying BitLocker must be encrypted. When we're talking BitLocker, make sure you get things like TPM chips. Most new devices have them. That is going to protect your device and really support the whole security moving forward. You want to set a baseline of things like BitLocker, dive through a bit deeper, look at some of the other areas. So you might have your BitLocker, you might then have, if you've got Windows Enterprise, for an example, and I do recommend if you're going a whole Microsoft 365 stack, you'll get Enterprise, things like Credential Guard, get those features turned on, attack surface reduction, go through and build these security baselines. These are the things that take time, but what this will mean is you're now building secure by design. So when a new device gets put into the system, all these security settings get applied, and you can actually look and go, okay, this device is compliant. There's no more of that whole, okay, I've got to jump in, I've got to touch every single device that's on BitLocker. I've then got to go through and set up all these ASR policies. It's just taking the manual intervention away, which means we reduce our human error. Now, if we make a mistake with a policy, that's fine. It's actually really easy to update a policy and have it just to apply out to all your devices. But go through, build out these security baselines and baseline policies so you can monitor how secure the devices are. The great thing about this is a lot of this is invisible to end users. They don't see this. So your customers probably won't appreciate this sort of stuff that goes on. But from an IT point of view, I'm going to feel a hell of a lot safer knowing that all those devices are set up, secured, doesn't matter what that end user does, I can monitor and maintain those devices at a secure state. And that is really core and important. So, so far we're sort of talking about get the devices enrolled into the vendor programs. We've talked about get the MDM configuration set up. Look at the configuration policies, the compliance policies, and now security baselines. That kind of leaves us with one large area, and that's really driven around your apps. This is probably one of the biggest bits of work you'll have to do, And it's one of the, in my opinion, it's one of the things that really enables end users and creates a great service experience. So, for an example of Intune, company portal app, that app employees need to be trained on that app. That means you've got to communicate with them, train them out, get people used to using it as the tool to get what they need. You should be deploying all your applications via this tool. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, delivery optimization. So apps in Intune support delivery optimization policies. That means all the devices can share the applications being downloaded between each other. So you're not downloading 50 versions of Office. Devices with Office are able to share that information across. It supports line of business applications. So any of those line of business stuff that you need to deploy, get it in Intune, build it out. There are multiple ways you can upload apps. If it's a Windows Store app, you need to go through and connect up things like Windows Store for Business. If it's Apple, you need to go through and in your Apple Business Manager, you need to generate VPP tokens. So you can buy bulk licenses from stores. And if you want apps to get automatically deployed without people having to put in their iCloud account, iCloud store, or the Apple Store details, you need to have VPP set up. The great thing is Apple has done a lot of work on the back end to consolidate their different portals they had into one. So Apple Business Manager has moved up, and it also now supports Azure Active Directory integration. So that's even a nicer step where they're actually letting you leverage your Azure AD identity now with Apple Business Manager. But the key is get the apps in. If you want a zero-touch deployment to happen with iPhones, you need that VPP token because you need the company portal app to be installed automatically onto the iPhone. Otherwise, it's not going to work, and a user's going to have to put in their own iCloud account to then get the app for you to enroll it automatically. For Android, for the Google Play Store, it's the same thing. You need to get that set up, and then in those different stores, buy the apps you need. Now, they will all sync into the Intune tenancy for you, which allows you to dive in, select the apps, and assign them to people. That will let you deploy the apps down. And now the thing about this is, look at what apps people actually need, and look at how you're deploying these devices. I know if I'm just deploying one device, I'll make all the apps that person needs required by just standard. So, that could be 5 gig downloads it has to download, but when you've got a decent internet connection, it's not a problem. If I'm deploying 100 devices, I'm probably not going to make all those apps required from day one. I'm going to make one app required by day one, maybe the Office suite, because I don't want to kill my bandwidth. Once that's done, I'm going to use that session that I'm helping them set up devices to go through and do a training of how to get their own apps from the company portal. That way they can go and download the apps they need, and it becomes a part of the whole onboarding process. But once I've got that initial chunk out of the way, I'm probably going to switch them to required, so people can, as I add one user at a time, they just get everything they need, right? So don't forget about plan your deployments, and look at your bandwidth. When you're going this approach, it is cloud native, which does mean you need to make sure all the apps, you're not flooding your links. I've seen a lot of people grind their NBN connections to a halt because they thought, we'll just by default we'll make everything required, and then they go and deploy 20 or 30 devices, and it just all falls over. The other thing to do with company portal is brand it. Set it up and brand it to the company. Make it nice, make it look decent. The other side it has is all the ICT information, support info can go into company portal. It means when a user accesses company portal, it kind of becomes a one-place stop for everything. They can get their apps, they can do things like reset device pins, as well as seeing the different ways to contact you from a support point side. So if you have a service portal, you put the URL in there. Email, put it in there. Phone number, put it in there. So all of a sudden you've still got an app in your business that tells people how to contact you for support. And that's what you want. You want to make it easy for them. You want to create that positive experience, something that they go, hey, this is actually great. This is what I want. It's easy. I can go there. If I need an app, it's there. I can grab it. I can download it. I don't need to go and harass my IT to put in their username and password for administrator rights to download and install this application. I can just click the install button from the company portal. The next thing comes to is if they need more apps, don't just instantly reject and go, nah, it's not required. Sit down and actually go, okay, this is this one app. Is this worth the effort to put it in company portal? If it's for one user, you might teeter yes or no. My recommendation would be yes. If you get all your apps into company portal, that starts to become a good place for your whitelist. You can see what apps are totally supported across your business, and then you can compare that to the current apps installed, and that will give you a really good health check on what shadow IT is happening in the organization. So, the thing about the apps is it is a time-consuming task, but if done correctly, it can be a really powerful way to give users what they need and what they want without getting a support ticket every time somebody needs to install something. Probably one of the last things about, once we've gone through, got this modern desktop and we've got the backend set up, is communicate and train your employees or your customers. Tell everybody. I know personally this is one that I've struggled with in the past because I came from a deep technical world where it was all about just making stuff work and it was cool. I thought it was cool, so therefore I thought everybody else thought it was cool. A few years later now, and I sit down as a solution architect where I understand what businesses want and need, and it's a totally different way. You have to communicate these changes and these tools you're using with your people. Tell them that you're really trying to make the experience focused around enabling them, making their life easy. If you look at some of the drivers and the generations coming into the workforce, they are technology natives. They've grown up forever with technology. I know when I think back to when I was young, I had my first computer at the age of 3. It was an old Macintosh, but I grew up with a PC all my life, and that's because my father was in IT during the 80s and 90s. So I was probably one of the first people from a cloud native, from a generation point of view, to be a ICT native from a young age. But now there's everybody in the workforce who's coming in. That millennial age is technology native. So, they're expecting this stuff to work, and they know they have a lot more knowledge than others. So focus on making the experience great, because that's the way as a business you will retain your talent. Get everybody to use it. So like I said, when I'm doing an onboarding session with 30, 40 devices, I don't make all the apps required. I get them to actually go in and manually download the apps from the company portal. I take them through company portal. I show them what to use, how to do it, but it's all driven around get in and use it. The great thing about this is, like I said, as everybody starts to engage with company portal and get the apps they want, you can start looking at shadow IT and you can reduce it, because you're giving the people what they need and want, but you're controlling it. You're not just going, cool, everybody's got local admin, go install anything and everything you want. You're going, hey, you're right, we do need to add this into the company portal. Give me a day, I'll put it in there, grab it tomorrow, you'll be good to go. That's going to help you reduce your shadow IT, which again is going to reinforce that secure by design. So again, I take us back to the why. And I think the thing is we are a service industry now. We're not just about the technology. We have to create positive experiences for our employees and our customers. Again, I go back to the example of coffee. If you go to a place and you have to wait forever, you get a coffee that's burnt, that creates a negative experience. How many people have gone back to the same place again for another coffee that's burnt? Chances are you've gone and found a cafe 5 minutes down the road and gone there. People remember the experience, so create a positive experience. Your new employees or new customers, they're all technology natives. They've grown up with this stuff at home and throughout school, so they know how to use it. They have a pretty, they're used to things working. And when someone says, "Nah, here's a crappy old brick of a laptop that weighs 5 to 6 kilos, runs really, really bad," they're probably not going to be very, very happy. And when people aren't happy, they tend to either lose productivity or they leave the organization and look somewhere else for a company that has better technology. So don't put yourself in that situation. Create the positive experiences, get the correct technology with the correct devices, and people will feel appreciated. They'll feel empowered that you're actually going, "Hey, we want to give you the correct tools to do your job." That means, it's an investment, but it's an investment that's going to probably increase a productivity gain, which means you are going to get better experience. And for people who are finance focused, it means they're going to get better value from those people with a better return on investment. The other side is you're reducing your time load. So automate everything. These tools will let you automate deployments so you don't have to touch a device. And that is important. If you're automating, 1, reduces the risk of human error. 2, all those policies that you have set up and going to get applied to that device. You can check if it has been applied. If it hasn't been, you can see if there's an error. You might have to touch 1 in 10 devices if there's an error due to something weird. The fact is you reduce the fact where you don't have to touch them every single device, and the security policies that you set are getting applied. If you want to deploy mass devices, you don't want to be touching every single device, so you use the tools and automate. The next thing is with those security baselines, that is going to ensure that your business and your organization needs the baselines that they need to from a security point. So depending on what security you look at, if you're going down the road of Microsoft, look at things like zero trust security, because that is one of the, a great security, concept, but you can achieve that using the modern desktop. If you're a Google fan, there's the Google Beyond Corp, which again is a very good security model. Very similar to zero trust. There's slight differences, but they're 2 ones that I definitely have a look at from a research point of view and just see what they're like. And for me, the last thing is there's no more imaging. I hate golden images. I hate maintaining golden images, and I hate having to manage and deploy that image across. With these policies and with Windows 10, it's almost like a cloud imaging. The device itself gets set up, deployed based on the policies I set. When I need to refresh that device, I simply, in the MDM, trigger an autopilot reset. That device will clean itself up and be ready for a new user from a state point of view. So it's really about let the MDM do all the heavy lifting and let the automation and the processes you've set in place do the work for you. Focus on creating a positive experience for the end users, and that is really going to be the key to that is the key to the modern device. So get your correct devices, MDM policies, and focus on the experience for end users. If they love it, that is a job well done. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation here around, the modern desktop and why we should be doing it and what it means. Like I said, for businesses, it's going to improve your investment. If there's any questions, please post them up now and we'll cover off those questions. Okay, so can't see any questions coming through. There was definitely a good comment from David there around TPM chips. You do want to make sure your devices have a decent TPM chip. because it is going to be essential for things like BitLocker, as well as the other Microsoft security stacks. And you're going to see TPM chips, already sort of filtering down to other device types as well. In terms of a good question here is about how much time has been saved setting up the foundation and keeping the lights on. So by, I guess, getting the MDM and the auto deployment set up, I guess if you look at a device taking maybe an hour to go through a whole imaging process and configuration manually per device, I get this down to maybe 5 minutes per device now, where a device is enrolled and I can sit down with a user, let them click through, let them drive the actual onboarding process, and then they get pushed down. When we're talking drivers, that's a harder question. So this comes down to what type of devices you're using. So things like Surface devices. So I'll just read the question. So someone's asked, you mentioned no need for images, but how about device drivers? How are these managed in Intune? So from a device point of view, when we're talking drivers, it depends on the device type. So some programs like Acer have their own updating tools. I would get those tools deployed in Intune and then look at the Acer tools around your policies. If you're using things like Surface devices or Mac devices, for example, those drivers get automatically installed via the update processes that those vendors have. So Windows Update for Business will do your drivers and firmware for Surface devices. Your Mac devices will be done by the Apple install. When it comes to things like Acer's HPs, you can definitely deploy drivers using Intune and make them a required app, because you can push down MSI installers or exe installers, so they can install and update that way. A good question here is, now that you have your foundation set up right, what projects has it allowed you to focus on? For me, the focus has then become, let's focus on what more can we do. So things like Teams deployments, focusing, once you've got your device and all that set up and automation, you start focusing on the cool stuff. So things like Teams, get Teams set up, deployed, running. If you want to deploy the phone system for Teams, those bits start to come out, because again, you've set them up with the correct devices that enable all that technology. You can dive into things like your AI and start looking at there, but it does create a lot more project opportunities, and it takes the day-to-day menial tasks of having to manage endpoint, sort of, I guess, deploying endpoint right out of that process. But from my point of view, I then focus on what can we do to improve productivity for a business, because that's where they see a return on investment. Looks like there's no more questions coming in. So what we'll do is, I guess we'll end the session there, and thank you very much.